Hi everyone, welcome to From Roots to Results, a modern-day slavery and human trafficking in the U.S. agricultural sector presentation by me, Shelby Bushnell, for my Writing in the Professions final. First up, I want to talk about the definition of human trafficking. Human trafficking is a form of modern-day slavery that has to do with coercing and or forcing persons to do things or go places that they otherwise would not have consented to. According to the Palermo Protocol adopted by the United Nations in 2000, this includes but is not limited to sexual exploitation, forced labor or services, slavery or practices similar to slavery, servitude, or the removal of organs. It's hard to cover everything that human trafficking includes, as these situations range widely among all races, genders, age, and cultures around the world. In 2016, a study was conducted based on data collected from the National Human Trafficking Hotline. As calls increased 35% from the previous year, the study learned of over 8,000 reports of human trafficking from multiple ethnic groups. Over 50% of the sex trafficking cases were concerning children under the age of 18. They were most often exploited in escort services, illicit massage studios, and private homes. The average age was 18. 46% of the labor trafficking cases concerned children under the age of 18. They were most often exploited in domestic work and agriculture and traveling sales crews. The average age was 23. When people think of human trafficking, they often think of sex trafficking due to its popularity in films like Taken or The Girl Who Played with Fire. Lara Clinton, a deputy district attorney from Fresno County, said that her typical sex trafficking cases include young girls, often runaways, and often in urban neighborhoods within city limits. She said that they are usually gang-related because they generate easy money. You can sell drugs only once, she said, but a girl can be sold over and over again. Sex trafficking is a big problem, but there is a lot more to human trafficking. For the purposes of this presentation, I will be talking about the topic of modern-day slavery and human trafficking related to the U.S. agricultural sector. A major reason for slavery continuing to exist in the agricultural sector of America is the lack of farm labor being covered under the National Labor Relations Act, the act which protects American workers to organize without fear of retaliation, fixed wages, health, and safety rules. A major reason for the lack of coverage was that in 1935, when the act was passed, many farms were family-run by adults and children. If the act were to cover agricultural work, then children would not legally be allowed to work on their family farms, and many farms wouldn't have been able to handle this loss and the cost of ensuring fixed wages and safety rules. In addition, many larger farms in the South were still majorly employing African American farmhands. A deep-set racist mindset led white lawmakers to enact acts like this one in ways that would negatively affect the black population and dissuade them from organizing and succeeding in a still segregated America, thus the exclusion of farm labor from the act. A result of this exclusion has been the disregard for today's labor force, migrant workers. Migrant workers are people who migrate within or outside of their country to pursue work. They do not usually intend to stay in the country or area they are working in, and usually use their wages to support their family back home. In an attempt to better this group of people, the Department of Labor has some wage and hour policies that farms are supposed to follow. But in places like South Florida, there are only 2 wage and hour inspectors assigned to the tens of thousands of farm workers, among other types of laborers. In addition to the limited inspectors in the South, another reason for the continued existence of slavery in the agricultural sector is a language barrier. These migrants often do not speak English, and until recently, the inspectors in these areas experiencing unlawful practices of wage and hour regulations only spoke English, the language of the farm crew leaders and growers. One example of human trafficking in the U.S. agricultural sector could be the tomato harvesting slavery ring discovered in Immokalee, Florida in 2007. Some 15 migrant workers have been kept captive at the farm for over 2.5 years. They were kept in a 20-foot-long padlocked box and sometimes forced to urinate and defecate inside. They were charged $5 for a shower with the garden hose. They were beat when they couldn't or wouldn't work, or when they tried to flee. It was one of Southwest Florida's biggest slavery cases at the time. The international conception of and approach to human trafficking has changed and advanced throughout the 20th century. This was done through the help of treaties, conventions, supplements such as the International Agreement for the Suppression of White Slave Traffic in 1904, the Convention of 1926, and the 1956 Supplementary Convention. These treaties, conventions, and supplements led to the Palermo Protocol of 2000. The 1990s were a time of heightened concerns over terrorism, awareness of migrants, the end of the Cold War, the collapse of the Soviet Union, and globalization, which included things like the EU, NAFTA, and the Internet. Worldwide instability led to vulnerability concerning human trafficking. The Palermo Protocol of 2000 was produced by the United Nations and changed the focus from slavery to human trafficking. It set forth obligations for the states to criminalize trafficking, actively identify victims, diligently investigate and prosecute trafficking, protect, support, and provide remedies to victims, provide special measures for child victims, actively prevent trafficking, and cooperate regionally and internationally. The United States still has a long way to go in dealing with human trafficking, but we have some success stories where traffickers have been apprehended and sentenced in a court of law. One such story is that of Deanna Diallo. I'm going to read an excerpt from a Dallas newspaper that wrote about her story after her trial in 2019. Deanna Diallo of Guinea, who was brought to Texas 18 years ago by a South Lake couple and forced to cook, clean, and serve as a nanny without pay. Diallo testified that she was isolated from her family members, emotionally and physically abused, and not allowed to go to school. She escaped in 2016 with the help of her former neighbors. A federal jury recently convicted Mohamed Toure and Denise Florence Cross Toure of forced labor and harboring an alien for financial gain, and each is now facing up to 20 years in prison. Victims of human trafficking of labor and sex may not seek help because they don't self-identify as victims. That's why it's important for law enforcement officials to continue to prosecute these cases. Too often young girls are married off to older men they don't know or brought to the U.S. from foreign countries to work for free. These are disgraceful crimes that should shame us all. Assistant U.S. Attorney General Eric Dryband said in a statement that Diallo was robbed of her childhood and that the verdict should send a message that the Justice Department will hold human traffickers accountable. It gives us hope that we can make a dent in this despicable behavior that ruins lives and damages communities abroad and right in our backyards. Modern-day slavery continues to exist in the agricultural sector of America because of a deep-seated racist mindset that led to the lack of farm labor being covered under the National Labor Relations Act, limited DOL inspectors, limited DOL resources, and more. Moving forward, to address the issue of agricultural slavery in America, we need to ensure good practice of DOL regulations. This includes better accountability of inspectors, more inclusiveness of the people being wronged, and more support for the offices of these inspectors. They must be given more hands, more monetary support, and more accountability to perform. I think the knowledge that they are being strictly accounted for in their duties to ensure the well-being of these mistreated workers is lacking. There's a major problem of deceit and malpractice involving migrant farm work in America. It is appalling to think that there are so many people with which we inexplicitly rely on that are lacking rights due to an old and racist American policy. It is proven in history time and time again that the rules and regulations and policies concerning labor laws and the mistreatment of poorer and less protected individuals were written in blood. We must learn from this history and stand on the right side of it now that such comparisons can be drawn. And that's it. Hope you all liked my presentation on modern-day slavery and the U.S. agricultural sector. Here are the resources I used and a few additional ones that were helpful in my research for this presentation. Thank you all so much.